there's not a lot of thought that kind of goes into these preparations prior to entering into a relationship or being married.
They always think things are going to be fine, things are great, this is going to work out, and we're going to live a happily ever after life. But the reality is that people change in relationships, marriages, people outgrow each other.
If they feel like that property settlement is under threat, potentially maybe there's a property under sale, or they're going to try and disperse those funds or transfer those funds overseas, that can cause a lot of stress. People are kind of always talking about the parenting aspect or the children in the relationship, but I think the property can be just as stressful. What about infidelity? Is that something that you see regularly?
Yes, and often clients come to you wanting some sort of compensation for being cheated on.
He was saying to me, like, how is this a fair system? I've lost my kids, my wife is cheating on me, she's ran away to another country, and she wants my money as well.
I think the problem is that usually one party has the money and the other doesn't. And when you're limited on funding, it creates a massive hurdle for the client who is in a disadvantaged position of not having access to those funds or assets, and then it gets used against them. I think it's really important to ensure, if you're opening any joint bank accounts, that the only way you can withdraw those monies is by...
Miller, thank you for joining us today on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we're speaking to you today. You're based out of Dandenong in Melbourne, is that right? Okay, so tell us a little bit about Dandenong for people that don't know about it. What's the area like, and what are the types of clients that you see?
It's actually a wide range of different types of clients. So I think my view is that Dandenong is one of the most multicultural sort of suburbs you can get in Melbourne. You've got your sort of Little India, you've got your Afghanistan Street. So there's a lot going on in Dandenong. And so you get quite a diverse range of clientele, from people who are immigrants to people who have lived here their whole lives.
Yeah. I remember the first time actually I went to Dandenong, and I was really blown away with the sights, sounds and smells of what I saw. I felt like I had just been transported overseas, right? Like, and to numerous countries. As you're walking around, there's like different districts. But what really shocked me was like the number of different Afghan restaurants that were there. And the first time that I was there, I just walked into the first one that I saw. Literally, there's 10 within eye distance, right? So you can see them everywhere. And the first one I walked into, really nice people. I just ordered a dish that I saw there, and oh my God, I can still I'll go back to Dandenong just to eat at that place again. Like, it was a random restaurant that I went into, but it was absolutely delicious. Like, I've got to say that Afghan food is one of the best plates of food I've ever had. Being in Dandenong, you must be spoilt for choice when it comes to all of your culinary delights.
Definitely. And being a foodie, I absolutely adore being around Dandenong. I think that we have so much to offer here, from the market to the nightlife, even the different restaurants. It's really a great place to have grown up and to continue sort of working in.
Any particular food favorites of yours?
Definitely the Afghan, yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. Oh my God, the rice is just amazing. All right, well, let's jump into the legal side of things. Family law is what you practice. Tell us what your day looks like, and what is a common kind of issue that normally you're faced with that family law practice?
Gosh, there are a wide variety of issues I think that we face as practitioners in family law, from the management of clients' expectations to the management of the court's expectations. There's a lot going on in family law. I always look at it as sort of a unicorn area of law, because you cross contracts, you cross obviously the separation and property division, children's matters, all of that. But then you also get into the sort of children's court aspect. There's quite a lot going on in family laws.
Yeah. It's like a merge of all fields, because you're talking about people's lives, right? And you're talking about their interactions, and people, messy creatures, and they might have multiple legal issues going on. Yes, people have separations and divorces and breakdown of relationship, and that's what we're dealing with, right? But on top of that, you would normally find that people also have other legal issues that are somewhat combined with them, and we also need to navigate around those. For example, you could have an issue with estates, where somebody is about to pass away or has passed away, and you are trying to figure out how that works in with their family law claim, what's going to happen with the kids in that situation, what's going to happen with the property of that relationship. And we're going to see how those two worlds of law merge and collide together. And sometimes it can be quite simple, but more often than not, trying to figure out how each one interacts with one another can be extremely difficult and complex.
That's right. And I
Yeah.
think that's what a lot of people don't realize when they go through the family law system. I think they don't realize how much these laws can intertwine and how the court will rely on information from other sources to make a determination as to what the outcome should be.
Yeah, so I know you've had a few cases that are in that kind of realm where there might be different sets of proceedings that are going on. There could be criminal proceedings that are running at the same time as the family law proceedings. There could be a commercial dispute. One person might have a dispute with somebody else about what's going on with their business or that there's money owed. There could be a personal injury claim that's also alongside a family law claim. So having to understand each one of those different fields and see how it impacts family law, it's actually quite interesting. Do you want to give us any example of any of those cases without, of course, disclosing too many details, but how those different fields interact with one another?
Sure. I've got a few in mind. I guess I'll start with the one that was the longest running case I had, which was 9 years in the family court. So 9 years is a long time to be in the
Nine
family
years
court.
in court. Can you imagine?
It was very debilitating on the client, but unfortunately our hands were tied because there were criminal proceedings on foot, and those criminal proceedings would have determined what the outcome was in the family court. So it created quite a complex sort of situation for my client because she felt that she was stuck.
Mm.
It created a financial stressor because it was ongoing proceedings and waiting for a pending settlement. There's a lot of sort of complexity with cases where there are these intertwined laws. And I think most often, as you said, you would find that most cases do have elements of that.
Yeah, and what I think is, if you look at the stats in Australia, right, in terms of people that are separating, there are huge amounts of people that are separating on a yearly basis. But the amount that actually go and see a lawyer is actually very few. We're talking less than 50% of people actually go and see a lawyer. There's also a much smaller percentage of those that end up engaging a lawyer and using lawyers to finalize their affairs when they separate. There's an even smaller percentage that end up going to court. And the last time I checked, it's less than 1% of all people that actually get separated end up in the family court. Now, if you think about the matters then that actually end up in the family court, they're normally there due to some kind of complexity or some kind of issue that's arisen. It could be potentially domestic violence. There could be issues of mental health, or there could be complexities that parties just can't agree on. Like, for example, a potential other case, legal case that's occurring in the lives of the husband and the wife. And the parties aren't sure how that's going to impact what's going to happen in their family law matter. So those are the ones that normally come to us. We get all of the hard ones. Unfortunately, the easy clients don't want to see lawyers. They don't want to spend their money on lawyers. And instead we get the difficult ones that have major issues. And so that's why we need to kind of have an understanding of all of these fields, right?
That's right. You really do. You have to be sort of across all the legal aspects. And if you're not, the best thing to always do is to refer to someone who is. We're not miracle workers. We don't have the answers for everything, but we are there to try and resolve the problem as efficiently and as cost effectively as possible.
Well, with all of this stress and all of these issues that come about, have you ever had a moment where you kind of just thought, look, this is too much. I'm just way too stressed out. I'm not cut out for this. This job is not for me. Have those thoughts ever crossed your mind?
Definitely. I've definitely had those moments, yes. Especially as a junior, I think you have those moments more.
Yep.
I think the pressure you feel from so many aspects, different aspects, being a lawyer, it is difficult to manage, especially when you are a junior and you're only starting out and trying to learn to set proper boundaries, trying to manage the expectations of clients, courts, other practitioners, your boss. There's a lot going into making sure that you're keeping everyone happy. And at times the pressure does get too much and you think, I'm not cut out for this. But I think with proper boundary setting, with a positive workplace and with, things put in place to, I guess, prevent burnout, you can continue and there is a good chance you will do a very good job too.
Do you think that's changed over time for yourself, like in terms of how you perceive those issues? Do you see that as something that you just kind of have to go through and then you see out through the other end over time, over experience?
To be honest, yes, I do think it's one of those situations. I think as lawyers, we already have a very high expectation of ourselves. I think that would be pretty fair to say anyway. So
yeah.
I think that with time, that sort of expectation is still there, but you sort of start to trust yourself and your judgment a little bit more and your knowledge.
Yeah. Okay. And so, people have this kind of conceived notion as to what lawyers do on a daily basis. It's probably what they see on TV, right?
Yeah.
If a first year law student was to spend the day with you and see what you do on a daily basis, what do you think would shock them in terms of your daily practice?
To be honest, probably the client management aspect, the fact that we have to answer phone calls at any time during the day sometimes, depending on our work. I think that a lot of people may think that lawyering is a 9 to 5 job. It's actually around the clock, especially when you have your clients' lives in your hands or the outcome of their life in your hands.
Yeah.
I think they would be shocked to see how much goes into our day-to-day work with clients and the fact that we do have to answer calls on a whim and answer questions on a whim.
Why is it so important that you're answering and responding to these phone calls consistently and, potentially later in the evening or outside of work hours? What's so urgent that these clients need to speak about?
Usually they're children, as we all know, and as parents, people who are parents and maybe even people who aren't parents. Children matters are a big thing. Parenting matters are a big thing. And so when clients are not able to see their children, communicate with their children, or something happens in relation to changeover, sometimes they do call you randomly and say, look, how do I respond to this, or what do I do in this situation? And you sort of find that sometimes you're even sort of managing your clients' lives, because I think when you're emotionally involved in something, as a parent would be, going through a really rough time, it's really hard to step out of the circle and see the bigger picture. So sometimes they rely on us to help them see that bigger picture.
And so that you're frequently getting calls for different types of advice, throughout the day. Is that right?
That is right, yes. So it can range from things like, for example, I had someone once call me about changing a nappy. There was a query about changing a nappy. And then other times it's something more serious, like I am not able to see my child this weekend because the other parent has not let me. So it can range. And then obviously there's the property aspect as well, which goes more into the financial side of things. But usually the urgent calls are about either children or in cases where funds might be disappearing or things like that.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a strange misconception out there that it's the parenting matters that are the most stressful. I do find sometimes the property matters, people can get really, really worked up about that. And it's people's livelihoods here as well that we're talking about. So emotions are high, and that part of the job is also extremely demanding as well, because if you tell somebody that they're going to be receiving this much or that much from a property settlement, or if they feel like that property settlement is under threat, potentially maybe there's a property under sale, or they're going to try and disperse those funds or transfer those funds overseas, that can cause a lot of stress. I think that part is often overlooked, and people are kind of always talking about the parenting aspect or the children in the relationship, but I think the property can be just as stressful.
Definitely. I do agree with that. I don't think one is more stressful than the other. I think everyone has their priorities and what they want out of a settlement or out of a parenting proceeding. At the end of the day, they both can be very stressful, costly. Like I say, court is a full-time job. And if you're in it, it is, demanding, and you will be reliving these traumatic moments that you've been through and whatever else you've been through. So yeah, it does create that emotional toll.
Yeah. So we all know being in court must be extremely stressful, must be tough. Have you had any stressful encounters standing in front of a judge where you forgot your file brief or anything like that?
I have had a few stressful moments in front of judges, for sure, mainly in relation to them being upset with what my client has done, and, they're sort of just saying what they think, or when something's not done.
That's not your fault what the client's done. They shouldn't be taking it out on you, right?
That's right. But unfortunately, in this area of law, it is quite common. I mean, it's obviously never personal, but it's something that we do have to learn to manage, because if the court's upset, you and your client are going to know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it's their only way of showing that they're upset is by getting angry or frustrated at you because you're the legal representative.
Well, that's right. We sort of are that buffer between the judge and the client, aren't we?
Yeah, that's what you're getting paid for, that.
Yeah.
To be emotionally abused by the court.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Well, there is a lot of talk about reforms around the way the courts deal with practitioners, judicial bullying. That is something that's kind of being raised in terms of in the profession. Would you like to see more of that being discussed as an ongoing issue? Do you think that's something that is a little bit off-putting for junior lawyers?
Definitely. It is very anxiety-inducing for junior lawyers. I think the more you practice and the more you go to court and sort of throw yourself into the deep end, the more of a thicker skin you build in relation to how you're treated at times by judicial officers. And that's not saying all are bullies, but there are that select few that can yell or can take it a little bit personally. And I think that there needs to be reform, because if it was any other workplace, it wouldn't be okay. So why should we as practitioners or even our clients have to witness or tolerate this behavior? And also it creates, I think, a sense of sort of worry for the client, because the client then starts to lose faith in you as their solicitor. Why are you getting yelled at by the judge? Or why is the judge saying this or saying that? So I think for us as practitioners, it is really important to have those reforms, because it will create more confidence.
You know, I know that recently the family court in Melbourne, they had a trial run with having a dog that's going to be in court with you. I forgot what the name of the dog is called, but it's like a care dog or something like that, where you're able to have the dog as you're in court, or maybe taking the witness stand or something like that. And they really celebrated the fact that they've got this dog there, and it's taking into account how parties might feel and all of the stress and anxiety that they had during these court proceedings, and how much of a traumatic time it must be. And we hope this dog is going to assist. I saw numerous posts about this on LinkedIn. It was also in the papers as well. And I just thought to myself, like, okay, great. You know, you're doing something, you're thinking about the parties that are involved, but how about you don't yell at everyone and stress everyone to the absolute limit and manage cases? Sure, we're not saying like don't manage cases and don't put timelines in place, and you know, you can show frustration at times if you're human, but consistently belittling or yelling or talking over practitioners and stressing them out, and same thing with self-represented litigants, isn't that going to be a higher priority? That's what I thought in my mind, than getting this dog and celebrating the wins that we have with this dog in court.
Yes, I do have to agree there. I think that the priorities are a little bit confused.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so, you know, with all the stress that's going on, what would you normally do to kind of wind down at the end of the day?
Well, I don't know if people would know this, but I do like to game. So my way of winding down after work would be spending time in nature with my kids, my partner, my dog. I like working out and cooking, painting, but I find gaming sort of distracts me the most. So I like to look for tasks that require minimal brain usage but distract me enough to not think about work.
Okay. Any particular game favorites?
I like a bit of everything. So at the moment I'm playing Pokemon Legends, but I usually play, first person shooter games, or I sort of have steered away from them these days because I find they don't really relax me much. So more of the adventure sort of Harry Potter, Zelda, all those sorts of games I'm finding are a lot better right now.
Okay, so puzzle games or
Yeah.
RPGs?
Yeah, a bit of everything.
Yeah.
But to wind down, I find the adventuring games are a lot.
Yeah. And it's quite satisfying as well when you're playing in like a game like that and you're achieving, getting through a boss or getting to the next level or anything like that. Do you play any
Yeah.
online games, like a multiplayer games?
Yeah, so please don't laugh. I do play a bit of Fortnite and Apex Legends.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
So yeah, I do play games like that, but I try and sort of steer towards, games that are
Yeah.
sort of less demanding.
Would you recommend it for de-stressing?
I actually would. Maybe not the shooter games, but the puzzle games, adventure games, definitely. I think you can sort of zone into that. It's sort of like reading a book, not
Yeah.
much different.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can zone in and it kind of takes you to a different world, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, especially when you got stressful job and stressful clients. Going to a different world for a little bit, it's surely going to just calm those nerves.
That's right.
Let's talk about some interesting cases that you've had and your experience in terms of handling them. What are the types of wacky things that you see when people are separating? Has there been any weird and wonderful standout stories that you can tell us?
I have a few. So in my 9-year matter, I had my client arrested for theft of some assets of the marriage, which my client had no idea even existed. So that was really interesting. And so we had to deal with that aspect. I suppose it was...
So wait, she was arrested for stealing something that she didn't know existed.
That's right.
A little bit confused as to how you can get arrested for that.
That's right. So
Did she actually have that in her possession?
no, she never had it in her possession.
Oh, okay. So it was the police were confused.
That's right. The other party was alleging that she had stolen those items, but
Okay.
in reality, he had hidden them.
So I'm curious, did the other party have any evidence to back that up in terms of when your client first got arrested? Did the other party just make a statement to the police and just say, did he just call up the police and say, hey, my ex stole these items? Can you go and arrest her? And did the police just follow that kind of directive, or did he have more than that?
I believe he told the police that he had camera footage of her attending the property and walking out with that item.
Yeah.
But I never cited the video myself, and I believe the police hadn't cited it either because there was no charges laid.
Okay. And so they just complied and arrested her.
They did. Initially, when he had reported the theft, they did.
And did she spend the night in the police station, or did she get released, or?
No, she was luckily released, but she did talk about how much trauma that brought to her because it was one of those cases where it was clear that the other party was using the system to bully and harass her.
That sounds horrible.
It was horrible. Yeah.
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 And so
that's just one example of.
yeah, so right there, it's an example of systems abuse, right? Where you're using different institutions in order to perpetrate further abuse, I guess, on an ex-partner or spouse.
Yeah.
Is that something that you see quite commonly?
Unfortunately, yes. It is an issue we have in the family law system, a big one, I think. The problem is that usually one party has the money and the other doesn't. You find that a lot of the family court cases where there's property settlements or even, property and children, one party has control of majority of the assets and finances. And when you're limited on funding and what you've got to sort of pay for your legal fees, it creates a massive hurdle for the client who is in a disadvantaged position of not having access to those funds or assets, and then it gets used against them.
So what can somebody do if they're, in a relationship or they're considering going into a relationship to avoid being in that situation on the other end where they're in a position where they could be at a disadvantage in the event that they separate?
I think it's really important to ensure if you're opening any joint bank accounts that the only way you can withdraw those monies is by attending the bank together or having an order of the court, obviously, to then deal with that sort of bank account so that people can't just pull out any funds they like at a separation, which has happened to my clients before. I think another important step would be to not be entirely financially dependent on the other party if you can avoid doing that. So having your own source of income or having a bank account where you have money going in, or you're saving some money so that, if something happens, you've got something to fall back on.
Yeah, that's really good, a piece of advice. So having a bank account under your own name, which has funds that are consistently going in so that if something does happen, you've got sole access to that. You don't have to rely on a joint bank account or a bank account in somebody else's name, because once the shit hits the fan, the banks aren't going to listen as to, oh no, I used to have access to this money all of the time. If it's not in your name, then it's not in your name. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
really good advice. I think being financially prepared is really important. And I think there's not a lot of thought that kind of goes into these preparations prior to entering into a relationship or being married.
No, the problem is that people are in a honeymoon phase. And so they always think things are going to be fine, things are great, this is going to work out, and we're going to live a happily ever after life. But the reality is that people change in relationships, marriages, people outgrow each other. There's different elements to what could happen in a relationship that could cause a separation. And I think it's really important to keep that in the back of your mind and remind yourself that you need to be dependent on yourself as well as building that partnership.
Excellent. Do you think there is an underlying kind of factor that you see across couples that are separating? Is there something that you consistently see? I know not across all the board, of course, there's a wide spectrum of things, but have you noticed that there's a particular thing that occurs in relationships that results in them breaking down?
A lack of trust or a break of trust is a massive one, whether that be, cultural issues such as letting family get involved in the marriage or relationships to, infidelity and a whole wide range of things that sort of can happen, even, emotional maturity, trying to grow as a person or a couple, all of that sort of plays a role in, forgot what the question was.
In seeing couples break down?
In seeing couples break down. That is all relevant.
Okay. What about infidelity? Is that something that you see regularly?
Yes. And often clients come to you wanting some sort of compensation for being cheated on. Unfortunately, that's not something the family law system does. It's a no-fault system in the sense of infidelity is not something you will be compensated for.
Okay. I think that's important for everybody to know, all the listeners. If you do get cheated on, you actually don't receive anything as a result of that. That reminds me of an incident where I had a client reach out and he had his wife and children that came over from a different country. They all came together as a family. And his wife was actually cheating on him. She was having an affair with her ex-boyfriend. And not only did she take the children and go back to their country of origin, leaving him with no time with his kids, but on top of that, was claiming a significant portion of his finances, and at the same time had gone back to her home country in order to be with her ex-boyfriend that she was cheating on him with. And so he was saying to
Gosh.
me, like, how is this a fair system? Like, I've lost my kids, my wife is cheating on me, she's ran away to another country, and she wants my money as well. And so he completely felt like the system was built against him. And having to explain to someone in that situation that infidelity doesn't really count for anything is a tough conversation to have.
Very much so, and not one anybody wants to hear. But unfortunately, that is the reality of it. Unfortunately, the court just does not have the time or resources to try and work out who was faithful, who was not, what was the reasoning behind the infidelity. There is so many layers of complexity when it comes to relationships. There's enough already that the court has to determine.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't have the time or resources
Can
to
you
do
imagine
any more.
it got down to the nitty gritty where, you know, you're checking text messages and seeing what the test was for cheating or anything like that? If there was a standard prescribed list as to this is what we consider cheating in Australia, that would just be, I don't think we'd ever be able to agree to a prescribed list like that.
No, and honestly, they'd probably need to make affidavit pages the limit 20 or 30 or 40 pages if that was the case.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. Well, Camilla, before we wrap up, I just wanted to get your thoughts on any potential law reforms that you would like to see in Australia. Is there a particular law that you felt like you would want to rewrite or change for whatever reason?
Yes, it's a bit of an interesting one and completely unrelated to family law, but I think we really need to shift our minds to the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. That's something I'm really passionate about. I do believe that it is an outdated act and it does not protect or regulate activities that may have significant impact on our environment. Insufficient penalties for the breaches, lack of adequately implementing and reviewing this act has resulted in habitat loss, species being led to extinction or endangerment, and the impacts of these activities have further hindered the environment. So it is imperative that we take advice and listen to our First Nations peoples. And so one of the things that is currently being spoken about is culling crocodiles in Australia. I've done a bit of research into this area and I find that the problem with our laws in relation to biodiversity and environment is that I forgot the word. Hang on a sec. The point of the Act is to ensure that the environment and biodiversity of Australia is properly protected. And that can't happen if we're shifting our minds to things like culling crocodiles because they are an important part of our ecosystem. So I think overall, that's just an example of what that act entails. But overall, I think we are very outdated in protecting our environment. And I think that needs some serious thought.
Yeah, and it's probably something that's not on the top of the agenda list and is not getting enough attention.
No.
So hopefully a few listeners listen to this and raise the awareness as to what's going on with that. And unless people are talking about it, it's not going to be addressed, right?
That's right.
Yeah. I can see the passion. Thank you, Camilla. That's all the time we have for this episode, but really appreciate you joining us on the show and I wish you all the best in your practice. All right, guys, tune in for next week for the next episode of Sue Me Later. And thank you very much for Camilla for joining us on today's episode.